Is it not funny how nowadays nobody ever teaches anybody anything about finances? Our school system never taught us anything about finances. You either grow up and learn about it, or you don't learn about it and then you waste your entire life working, earning and spending it as quick as you earn it. Anyways, it is what it is. I remember when I was young, I used to keep my dad's ATM card and he used to earn 60,000 per month. And I used to think, well, this is a lot of money. How come 1 week later he has nothing? And I would ask him, Dad, hii ni pesa mingi, kwani pesa unapeleka wapi? And he would tell me, you don't understand. When you grow up, you're going to understand. Guess what? I grew up. Oh boy, did I understand? Did I understand? And I come to realize one thing. Financial literacy and financial education is the most expensive thing in this country. I mean, naonanga watu wanakuja masemina huku na workshop. People from US and everywhere, they come to teach people on how to run their businesses, how to manage their finances. Do you know how much they charge per ticket? The lowest that I've ever seen of a ticket being charged, I think it was around 10,000 Kenya shillings. And it's for like 2 hours. It's ludicrous. The only way we have to learn about these things is by ourselves. You have to get into the world, you mess until you learn the hard way. We don't have mentors, we don't have anybody who knows something, they are hiding it. They don't want to teach you. You have to go out of your way for you to learn something. If you don't, woe unto you. You'll just be making a lot of money and having nothing. A situation might happen where you need money like immediately and you have nothing. And that is how people end up in debt, depression. Because an emergency happens and you don't have an emergency fund. Then you are sucked into debt. You are sucked into high interest loans. And then repaying is a pain in the... You cannot keep up with them. They are calling you every single second. They are calling your relatives. They are calling your pastors. Ay, yow. And that is why today's video is dedicated on how to set up an emergency fund. An emergency fund is money that you put aside for a rainy day. For example, if you have a car, you might be involved in an accident and the car might need an engine overhaul. That is an emergency. You can't go to work without this vehicle. Maybe you work somewhere in the interior. There are no public means of transport. You need your car. Another example, all of a sudden, your kid, your spouse, or your parent passes away. You need money for the burial. Burials in this country are not a cheap affair, my friend. We don't burn people. We are largely a Christian country. You have to have a matanga for at least 7 days. Then you have to have a burial in which you have to cook for over 400 people. In Africa, we don't have those private burials. An emergency also is when you abruptly lose your job. One day the boss might wake up and the auctioneers come to your company and they lock it down, carry everything, even that month's salary you won't get, and you had nothing. You had saved nothing. That is an emergency. I used to have a movie shop and I used to have a shop for selling second-hand clothes. And one day at 3 a.m. in the morning, I received a call. Yo, you know what? Kuna chomeka. My guy, I ran. I found the fire had already finished raising the movie shop. Now it was on the mtumba shop. And I couldn't even rescue even one item of clothing. That is what I call an emergency. And I didn't have an emergency fund. Oh boy, did I struggle. I went into debt, like serious debt. Debt on top of debt, over 50-something thousand in debt. So such scenarios are scenarios where an emergency fund could have really kicked in and helped. How do you set up an emergency fund? Before you set up an emergency fund, you need to ask yourself 3 simple questions. How much do you spend in a month? I mean, how much money comes from your pocket to other things? Inaweza kuwa ni kubuy chakula, inaweza kuwa ni kupiga sherehe, it might be repaying a loan, school fees, all of that. You put it in your calculation. How much do you spend in a month? You sit down for a whole month painstakingly. Every day you record amount of money you use and what you use that amount of money for. And at the end of 30 days or 31 days, you do your calculation. For me, it's around 40,000. Let's stick with 40,000 as an arbitrary figure. The second question is, how long do you need your emergency fund to sustain you for? I like working with 6 months. So let's give it an arbitrarily 6 months. So the total of emergency fund that you will need for you to survive for 6 months is 6 months times 40,000, which gives it 240,000 Kenya shilling. The third question, and the most difficult question to answer, where will I get the money to save for my emergency fund? Because let's be honest, right now, especially in this country, every single penny you make, it's either taxed or the food prices are high or somebody wants to get something, there is black tax. You literally have nothing left over for you even to save. Leave it even alone for the emergency fund. Even to invest, you have to get into debt to invest. And you cannot get into debt to start an emergency fund. At least in an investment, you know that is money that is coming back. But in an emergency fund, it's laying there, waiting for the worst. That is the work of an emergency. So where do you get the money? Let me give you an example with myself. These are the 6 things that used to waste my money. Eggs. Every day I would eat at least 1 egg boilo. I would drink 1 energy drink, Predator ama Play. I would buy data worth 100 Kenya shillings. Every evening I would take keg, minimum 1 cup, 60 Kenya shillings. I would take mutura for 20 bob, and I would also drink soup for 20 bob. That's 40 bob daily. And every evening, I would not walk home. I would take a boda boda, aka Nduthi, at 50 Kenya shillings. If you do that calculation, that's around 350 Kenya shillings daily. Translates to 10,850 Kenya shillings in a month. And that is just on me. If I would buy an egg, I would also buy an egg for my wife, or even for my small kiddo. You know, there are some things that you can't just have alone. So if I add my expenses plus those of my wife, I would spend around 21,700 on these 6 useless things. Haba na haba ujaza kibaba. Now, I won't get into the nitty-gritty on what I reduced and what I upped, but I have my next video on how I sorted out these 6 things and how much I was able to save. It will be a good video, it will be a nice video, it will make you self-aware on what you spend, on how you spend it. So kindly subscribe, turn on notifications, and watch the next video. Now, to cut long story short, after I trimmed down on those 6 very bad habits and very bad and terrible expenses, I realized that my wife and I were saving around 10,000 on those 6 things. And that 10,000, we could be able to put it in our joint emergency fund. Now, as we said earlier, 40,000 times 6 months is 240,000. And we are saving 10,000 every month toward our emergency fund. Sometimes we could even add that amount because kuna time angia kwa job, maybe kukopoa nini, because the point of an emergency fund is make sure it's complete as soon as possible, ndo iweze kuwasaidia, because an emergency can occur any moment. The study says an emergency occurs once every 5 years. But for the sake of this video, an emergency can occur any moment. Therefore, 240,000 would need us to save 10,000 per month for 24 months, which means it will take us 2 years saving 10,000 every month to raise 240 for our emergency fund. And that is our goal. And that is what we are focusing on. And by God's grace and by our hard work from the energy that God has given us, we are going to accomplish that. And that is how we determine the duration that you are going to take to fully set up your emergency fund. Let's focus on the question that most of my friends ask me when I teach them or when I try to convince them to start an emergency fund. The first question is, why do I need an emergency fund? People out here are so used on just living by the mercies and the graces of God. People don't see the point of an emergency fund. They are like, I'm already 35 years old. Things come and I weather them and I get through them and I'm here and I'm alive. But my question is always, at what cost did you weather them? How much debt did you have to take? How much in interest did you have to repay those debts in? Where was your dignity when you are going begging people for bereavement and burial money for your relatives, family members, and friends? Where was the dignity in that? And they're like, oh, you're making some points. It is not that you can't live without an emergency fund. An emergency will not kill you, but what comes after the emergency, the quality of life after that emergency, is what necessitates the having of an emergency fund. The other question I get is, I don't have any money to start an emergency fund, or my money is caught up somewhere. And I tell people, just as like in my example, you can't lack something to shave off your expenses. Hauwezi kosa kitu unaweza toa kwa expenses zako. Be it 20 bob, 30 bob. And let me tell you something about saving. The moment you start, it's addictive. You might start even with 200 per month, 1,000 per month. By the time you are doing 1 year, my friend, you will just be looking for money purposely to save. Not even to invest, not even to eat, not even to buy anything new. Any money you earn, you will have consciously done the math and known what amount is going into saving towards the emergency fund and such thing. And guess what? The good thing about this is that it teaches you how to save. It teaches you on how to cut down on wastage. It teaches you on sacrifice. Because if you sacrifice on these bad things that you buy every time, and then you save the money, and then you see the money in your account, the best feeling ever. You just look at this money and you're like, yani, this is my money. Hii pesa ni yangu yote. And you're motivated because it's money you can see. So every time you log into that account, you just see your 50K, your 100K, your 200K is just there. You know you're untouchable. You're not even afraid. The other question is, where do I keep this money? This is an emergency fund. You need to access it pronto. So don't put it in a fixed interest account. When you need that money, you can't withdraw it, and if they allow you to withdraw it, they will charge you such a big penalty. They watakupiga fine ingine big. If you have 50,000, you might end up withdrawing 42,000, a whole 8,000 gone like that. If it's a lot of money, like 600k, 300k, that's not amount of money that you'll have in your house just laying around. You just keep the money in a simple normal account, like an equity account or a cooperative account, an account that you can operate from your phone, an account where you can share the login credentials with your partner, whatever situation you are in, and they can be able to access that fund. Remember, it might be an emergency fund and you might be the one who's sick. You might get involved in an accident and you need like an urgent surgery. Somebody has to withdraw that money on your behalf. If it is small money like 30,000, 40,000, you can keep that under your mattress or somewhere in a house, in a corner somewhere in the house. Then you can inform your partner so that they know, or your child, or whoever it is that you trust the most, so that they can know where these funds are. Another question: after I attain my goal of saving an X amount of my emergency fund, what should I do next? This is what I tell people. The whole journey of being able to save for an emergency fund is a lifestyle on itself. You should continue with that habit. That habit alone will save you a lot. Imagine now you have attained your goal. What next? You can now save to do very many things. Saving for 2 years non-stop is not a joke. That will have become who you are. Save to grow your life, save to grow your income, save to do something positive with the money. Just because now umefikisha ile pesa target ulikuwa unataka, now you start go partying, you start wasting your cash on other things that are not important, you will just end up dipping again to the emergency fund because you will have relapse. So if you attain your goal, keep on keeping on. Just change the reasons. It was an emergency fund, now you can say this is for the car. You can now say this is for the 75-inch TV that I've always wanted. Do not touch that fund. Save for that. Another question I get asked: what qualifies for an emergency so that you can use your emergency fund? Your common sense will help you deduce as what qualifies to be an emergency and what fits that criteria. So don't worry, when an emergency happens, you will realize. But let me tell you something: buying a 75-inch smart TV just because your friend bought one is not an emergency. Upgrading your car because you can sell the one you already own and just add some little money to upgrade, that is also not an emergency. Throwing a birthday party, a big one for yourself or your kid or your wife or your spouse, whatever, that is not an emergency. Buying land is not an emergency. Land will always be available. There is nowhere that land is going. Focus. To end this video, I will like to remind you, if you have found value in this content, kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel, share this video, and like even this video so that the algorithm can recommend this video to more viewers. Thank you, God bless you, and Wakanda forever.